It started with a smell. Not a loud, obvious betrayal. Not a confession, not a caught moment, not a tearful admission. Just a smell. Cheap perfume. Sweet, cloying, unmistakably feminine, and unmistakably not mine. I was standing in the hallway of the home I had spent 11 years building. The same hallway where I'd hung our wedding photo. The same hallway where my daughter had taken her first wobbling steps, laughing when she fell, reaching up to me with those tiny, trusting hands. I was standing right there, in the middle of all of that love, all of that history, and I felt the floor dissolve beneath me. He walked in carrying that smell like it was nothing. Like it was just another Tuesday. He set his keys down on the counter, same hook, same routine, and offered me a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. I watched him. I studied every detail of his face. The slight tension in his jaw, the way his gaze slid just a fraction of an inch away from mine, the careful, deliberate way he kissed my cheek. Practiced. Hollow. I had known something was wrong for months. You know how people say they had a gut feeling? Mine wasn't a feeling. It was a scream. A constant, low-level scream that I had been drowning out with grocery lists and school pickups and the ordinary noise of a life I was fighting, every single day, to hold together. The late nights at work. The phone face down on the table. The passwords changed without explanation. The way he laughed differently on calls in the other room, lighter, freer, younger somehow, in a way he hadn't laughed with me in years. I told myself, you're being paranoid. You're stressed. You're insecure. Good wives don't snoop. Good wives trust. But standing there in that hallway, breathing in the perfume of another woman on my husband's collar, I stopped being a good wife in the way he had always defined it. I became something different. Quieter. Sharper. More dangerous. I didn't say a word. I just smiled back and said, "Dinner's almost ready." Because the most powerful thing a woman can do, in that moment, is wait. And I had decided, calmly, completely, irreversibly, that this was the last time he would ever lie to me. Children feel everything. They don't have the words for it yet, but they feel it in their bones. The shift in the air when a family begins to fracture. My daughter, Layla, was 9 years old. She had her father's eyes and my stubbornness, and she was too smart for her own good. 3 days after that night in the hallway, she came to me while I was folding laundry, a task I had started doing with my bedroom door closed, because it gave me somewhere quiet to fall apart. She stood in the doorway in her pajamas, her stuffed rabbit tucked under her arm, and she said, "Mom, is Dad leaving us?" 9 words. 17 syllables. And every single one of them broke something inside me that I don't think has ever fully healed. I set down the shirt I was folding, his shirt, and I looked at my daughter's face. That round, open, trusting face. And I made a decision in that exact moment. I would not let her see me shatter. I would not let her carry my grief on top of her own. She was 9. She was supposed to be worried about her spelling test, not the structural integrity of her family. "No, baby," I said, and I pulled her into my arms and held on. "We're okay." It was a lie. But it was the only lie I ever told for her sake, and I stand by it. That night, after she fell asleep, I lay on my side of the bed, his side was empty, he was working late again, and I let myself feel everything I had been refusing to feel. The grief hit me in waves, first disbelief, then sorrow so deep it had no floor, then a cold, clarifying fury. I thought about every anniversary we had celebrated. Every birthday cake. Every vacation photo where we were all smiling, arms around each other, looking like the kind of family people aspire to be. Was it all fake? Was I the only one who didn't know? Or worse, was it real once, and I had somehow missed the moment it stopped being real? Had I failed us? Had I loved him incorrectly, imperfectly, not enough? I spent 3 hours blaming myself before something in me, quiet, firm, immovable, said, "Stop. You did not do this. He did. And from that moment, I stopped asking what I had done wrong. I started asking what I was going to do next. The truth, once it starts unraveling, doesn't stop at one thread. I had hired a private investigator. A woman, professional, discreet, businesslike, who met me at a coffee shop and slid a manila envelope across the table with the same energy she might use to pass the sugar. Inside were photographs, dates, locations, financial records. Her name was Dina. She was 26. They had been together for 14 months. 14 months. My son had started middle school in that time. My daughter had lost her first 2 teeth. I had been diagnosed with and recovered from a minor health scare, alone in the doctor's office, telling myself not to bother him at work. And he had been building an entire second life. Dinners, weekend trips, hotel rooms. He had told her he was working on leaving. He had been stringing both of us along. Her with promises of a future, me with the illusion of a present. But the photographs were not even the worst part. The financial investigator I hired next, because once I started pulling threads, I could not stop, uncovered something that turned my grief to stone-cold rage. He had moved money. Quietly, gradually, over 2 years. Small transfers that wouldn't trigger alerts. Out of our joint savings. Out of his business account. Into a private account I didn't know existed. And some of that money, not all, but some, had come from the college fund. The one we had started the week we brought our daughter home from the hospital. The one where we'd proudly watched the balance grow every year, telling ourselves, this is how you give your children a future. He had taken from his children's future to fund his affair. When I confronted him, I had been planning it for days. I had rehearsed calm. I had decided I would not cry, would not yell, would not give him the satisfaction of seeing how completely he had gutted me. I sat across from him at the kitchen table, the same table where our family ate breakfast every morning, and I laid the documents out in front of him. Slowly. One by one. He went pale. Then his jaw tightened. I'm not happy, he said. I haven't been happy for a long time. I waited. I let the words sit in the air between us. Then he said it. You should have known. You should have seen this coming. And something in me went very, very still. Not because he had hurt me, he had. Not because I was shocked, I wasn't anymore. But because I realized, in that moment, that this man was never going to take responsibility. Not today. Not ever. And if I waited for an apology, I would be waiting for the rest of my life. So I closed the folder. I looked him in the eye. And I said, very quietly, I did see it coming. That's why I'm ready. There is a particular kind of strength that only comes from having nothing left to lose. I had lost the marriage. I had lost the illusion of partnership. I had lost years of trust, years of investment, years of belief in a person who had turned out to be something I didn't recognize. I was standing in the rubble of my life with 2 children looking at me for direction, and I had a choice. I could collapse. God knows I wanted to. I could draw the curtains and disappear into grief and let the lawyers handle it and come out the other side smaller, diminished, permanently apologetic for a wound I didn't inflict on myself. Or I could get strategic. I chose strategic. I called my sister first. She drove 4 hours without asking why. When she arrived and I opened the door, she took one look at my face and said, "Tell me everything." And I did. For the first time in months, I told someone everything. And just the act of saying it out loud made it real in a way that gave it shape, gave it edges I could actually hold. "What do you need?" she asked when I finished. "A good lawyer," I said. "And for everyone to know exactly who he is." The lawyer came first. She was a woman who had clearly seen every variation of this story, and she listened to mine with the kind of focused attention that told me she was already 3 steps ahead. She reviewed the financial documents, the investigator's report, the account transfers. She set her pen down and looked at me. "This is a good case," she said. "If you're prepared to be thorough." "I'm prepared to be thorough," I told her. We spent 4 sessions mapping out every angle. Property. Assets. The college fund, oh, we were getting that back. Child support, structured and secured. Alimony based on the income disparity he had created by encouraging me to be the primary caregiver while he built his career. Every advantage he had taken, we were going to name and address. But the legal strategy was only part of the plan. The other part was harder. More personal. More necessary. He had built his entire image, professionally, socially, within his family, on being a good man. A devoted husband and father. A pillar of integrity. I had watched him perform this version of himself for years at dinner parties and family gatherings and professional events, and I had smiled beside him and never once let on that I suspected anything, because I was holding the family together while he was dismantling it. He had used my silence against me. I was done being silent. His mother called him the good son. He had a framed award on his office wall. His business partners invited him to their children's graduations. All of it was about to change. I arranged a family dinner at his parents' home, a casual Sunday gathering, the kind they'd had 100 times before. His mother was warm and welcoming and completely unsuspecting. His sister was there with her husband, their kids running through the backyard. It felt, from the outside, like an ordinary family evening. I arrived with a folder, a calm face, and 11 years of suppressed truth. I waited until dinner was over. Until the plates were cleared and the coffee was poured and everyone was settled into that comfortable after-dinner warmth. He was in the middle of a story, animated, at ease, charming in the way he always was in rooms where people loved him. I said his name once. He stopped. He looked at me. And something in his expression shifted, a flicker of something he quickly suppressed. I stood up. My voice didn't shake. I had practiced this so many times alone in my car that the words had become something solid, load-bearing, capable of holding the weight of everything I needed to say. I told them. All of it. The affair. The duration. The financial transfers. The college fund. I passed the documents around the table, printed clearly, organized, because I wanted no ambiguity. I wanted no, she's exaggerating, or there must be an explanation. I wanted the truth to be undeniable, sitting there on the table between the coffee cups like something none of them could look away from. The room was completely silent. His mother sat with her hand over her mouth. His sister had stopped breathing, I think. His father, a man of few words and strong opinions, looked at his son with an expression I will never forget for the rest of my life. And he, my husband, sat there with his face doing something complicated. Shock. Shame. And then, beneath both of those, anger. Directed at me. As if my decision to stop lying on his behalf was the betrayal in the room. You didn't need to do this, he said, his voice low and tight. You're right, I said. You could have done it yourself, honestly, a long time ago. But you didn't. So I did. I picked up my bag and I walked out of that house. I sat in my car in the driveway and I took 3 very slow breaths. My hands were trembling. My heart was hammering. But I was not broken. For the first time in years, I was free. What happened next unfolded the way these things always do when a carefully constructed lie is finally exposed, swiftly, and without mercy. His business partners, 2 of whom had known me for years, had attended our daughter's birthday parties, had shaken my hand at company dinners, called a meeting. There were concerns, they said, about character and judgment. He had used company resources. Small amounts, but enough. Enough to matter. His closest friend, a man he had known since college, stopped returning his calls. His family rallied around me. That surprised him, I think, more than anything else, the idea that his own people might choose me. His sister texted me. His mother called me, crying, apologizing on behalf of a man who hadn't yet apologized for himself. His father drove to my house with 2 bags of groceries and stood at the door looking uncomfortable and said, "You didn't deserve this." Neither did those kids. Then he left. I stood in the doorway holding those groceries and I wept. Not from sadness. From relief. From the strange, overwhelming grace of being seen correctly. The divorce proceedings were hard, as they always are. There were days when the paperwork buried me. Days when the children cried and I couldn't explain to them in ways they would understand why their family was rearranging itself. Days when I sat in parking lots between school pickup and grocery runs, and I gripped the steering wheel and reminded myself, "You are doing this. You are holding this. You are not going to fall." He tried, toward the end of the proceedings, to negotiate. To appeal to something, nostalgia, maybe, or pity. He sent a message through his lawyer suggesting that we consider the impact on the children of a prolonged public dispute. My lawyer responded on my behalf. The college fund was restored, in full, with interest. The assets were divided equitably. Child support was secured. Alimony was agreed upon. It was not a perfect outcome. There is no perfect outcome when a family breaks. But it was a just one. And justice, I had learned, doesn't always feel triumphant. Sometimes it just feels like the ground is solid beneath your feet again. I moved into a smaller house with the children. 3 bedrooms, a decent yard, a neighborhood where the kids could ride bikes to their friends' houses. The first night we slept there, my daughter came into my room at midnight and curled up beside me like she used to when she was small. "Mom," she said into the darkness, "I think I like it here." "Yeah," I said, and I meant it more than I had meant anything in years. "Me too. I want to be honest about something, I don't spend much time thinking about him anymore." That probably sounds impossible to anyone in the middle of their own crisis, when the person who hurt you is somehow everywhere, in every memory, every financial document, every conversation with your children. But time does something quietly extraordinary. It creates distance. And distance, eventually, becomes peace. But for the sake of this story, I'll tell you what I know. He lost the life he had. The apartment he moved into after I filed was small and impersonal. The opposite of the home we had built. Dina, the woman he had risked everything for, ended things within 5 months. Turns out, a man who deceives his wife with ease is not someone a woman trusts with her heart. He had never considered that particular irony. His career stabilized eventually, though never quite returned to what it had been. Reputation, I've learned, is like fine china. Once it's cracked, people always remember where the crack was, even if they can't quite see it anymore. His relationship with the children was the part that broke him most, I think. They weren't cruel to him. My daughter and son are good people, I made sure of that, deliberately, in every choice I made after the divorce. I never spoke badly of him to them. I answered their questions honestly but carefully, age-appropriately, without poison. Because they deserved a father even if I no longer deserved a husband. But children don't forget. They file things away. And as they grew, they asked harder questions, formed clearer opinions, and chose, sometimes, not to spend time with him in the ways he had hoped. That is its own consequence, not one I engineered, but one he earned. Bitterness is a tempting companion in the aftermath of betrayal. It offers the illusion of power. If I'm still angry, I'm still engaged, and if I'm still engaged, I haven't really lost. But bitterness is corrosive. It doesn't discriminate. It eats through the vessel holding it as surely as anything else. I chose, deliberately and consciously, not to carry it. That was perhaps the hardest work of the entire ordeal. Harder than the legal proceedings, harder than the financial untangling, harder even than the sleepless nights and the crying in parking lots. Choosing not to let what he did become the defining story of my life. Here's what no one tells you about rebuilding: it is slow, and it is not linear, and some days it looks like regression, but it isn't. It's integration. Your life is folding in the broken pieces and incorporating them, the way bone grows back stronger around a healed fracture. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, I went back to work full-time for the first time in 7 years. I had left my career to raise the children, and there had been days in that marriage when I had quietly resented the way that sacrifice had been taken for granted. My career, my independence, my professional identity, all quietly surrendered for a family that was secretly being hollowed out. Starting over professionally at 38 is humbling and terrifying and, unexpectedly, thrilling. I had been so long defined by my role as wife and mother that I had forgotten I was also other things. Capable things. Things that had nothing to do with him. My daughter became my mirror in the most unexpected ways. I watched her handle a falling out with her best friend with more grace than I had managed in years of a failing marriage. I watched my son stand up for a classmate being bullied and felt something shift inside my chest, a recognition. He had learned that from somewhere. From watching me, maybe. From the way I had eventually stopped staying quiet. There were good days and terrible days. There were mornings when I stood at the kitchen counter drinking coffee alone and felt the most profound, unexpected contentment. And there were evenings when the children were with him for the weekend and the house was so quiet it felt like a living thing, and I had to remind myself that solitude and loneliness are not the same. I made friends I would never have made in the bubble of that previous life. I traveled once. Just a weekend, nothing dramatic, a city I had always wanted to see, and I walked those streets alone and thought, I chose to be here. I chose this. And it is enough. I started writing. First in journals, then in longer pieces. Processing, excavating, building something out of the rubble. I'm not sure what it will become yet. But the act of putting words to experience is its own form of power, and I was done surrendering power. If you are reading this in the middle of your own storm, and I believe some of you are, because these stories are far more common than the silence around them suggests, then I want to say a few things directly to you. First, what happened to you is not a reflection of your worth. A person's capacity to betray you is a reflection of their character, not yours. You could have been more perfect, more attentive, more forgiving, more extraordinary in every possible way, and a person who was going to lie to you would still have lied. That was never about you. Second, your anger is not a weakness. The rage I felt in those first weeks was not something to be ashamed of or medicated or suppressed. It was information. It told me where my values were, what I would and would not accept, what I was fighting to protect. Anger, channeled correctly, is not destructive. It is a compass. Third, the revenge I sought was not about punishment. I want to be clear about this, because the word revenge carries violence in it that doesn't apply to what I actually did. I exposed the truth. I protected my children's financial security. I rebuilt my independence. I refused to be defined by someone else's choices. None of that was about making him suffer. It was about making sure that what he had done would not go unaddressed, and that my life, our lives, would not be permanently smaller because of it. True revenge, if you want to call it that, is building a life so full and so genuinely yours that the person who tried to diminish you becomes irrelevant. Not in a performative way. Not to prove something to anyone else. Just, actually, truly irrelevant. Fourth, you are going to be okay. I know that sounds thin and inadequate when you are in the worst of it. I know you'll be okay is what people say because they don't know what else to say. But I'm not saying it as a platitude. I'm saying it as a person who was not okay for a very long time, and who is now, undeniably, and on most mornings, okay. More than okay. The ground comes back. The solidity returns. Slowly, then all at once. It is a quiet Sunday as I write this. My daughter is in the backyard reading, her legs slung over the arm of the old patio chair we found at a flea market and repainted ourselves, a project she proposed and we completed over 2 messy, laughing afternoons. My son is at a friend's house. The kitchen smells like the bread I made this morning just because I wanted to, not because anyone expected it. This is the life. Not the Instagram version of a life, not the performance of a life, the actual, imperfect, sturdy, ordinary thing. I think about who I was 11 years ago, standing at the altar, believing in the person in front of me with my whole heart. I don't regret that belief. I was loving correctly. The problem was never my love, it was the recipient. And I think about who I became through the breaking, sharper, yes, but not harder. More discerning, but not closed. Wounded, but not defined by the wound. They say what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. I've always found that saying a little aggressive, a little triumphalist. I prefer to think of it differently. What doesn't kill you makes you more yourself. Strips away the versions of you that were maintained for other people's comfort. Leaves behind whatever is actually, essentially, irreducibly you. And what's left, I have found, is enough. Is more than enough. If you are out there, broken and betrayed and wondering if there is a version of your life that is worth fighting for on the other side of this, there is. It doesn't look exactly like the life you planned. It is smaller in some ways and larger in others. It is quieter. It is genuinely, sustainably yours. Fight for it. You are stronger than the story being told about you. You are more than the wound. And somewhere ahead, past the paperwork, past the sleepless nights, past the grief that moves through you in waves, there is a quiet Sunday morning with bread in the oven and your children in the yard, and you will sit with your coffee and feel, for the first time in a long time, like yourself again. That moment is coming. Just hold on.